Good evening, I'm Jim Lehrer. On the NewsHour tonight, the new Democratic day in the Senate. We have a Kwame Holman report and a newsmaker interview with Senate Majority Leader Daschle. Then Gwen Ifill looks at a court decision against delaying the execution of Timothy McVeigh. Jeffrey Kay tells the story of the Hahn victory in the Los Angeles mayor's race. And Ray Suarez talks to Jeffrey Smith of the Washington Post about Macedonia. It all follows our summary of the news this Wednesday.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by...
Imagine a world where we're not diminishing resources, we're growing them. Ethanol, a cleaner burning fuel, made from corn. ADM, the nature of what's to come.
And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. This program was also made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
A federal judge today refused to delay Timothy McVeigh's execution. The convicted Oklahoma City bomber is to die by lethal injection next Monday. He asked for a delay because the FBI failed to turn over all documents for his trial in 1997. But Judge Richard Maich in Denver said they would not change the fact of McVeigh's guilt. Defense lawyers immediately filed an appeal. We'll have more on this story later in the program tonight. Democrats took control of the Senate today. Senator Tom Daschle of South Dakota became the new majority leader. He promised to work with Republicans where possible. Senator Trent Lott of Mississippi, now the minority leader, said he welcomed Daschle's words. The change happened because Vermont Senator Jim Jeffords switched from being a Republican to an independent. We'll have more on the story and an interview with Senator Daschle right after this news summary. James Hahn will be the next mayor of Los Angeles. The longtime city attorney defeated fellow Democrat Antonio Villaraigosa in Tuesday's nonpartisan election. Hahn won 54% of the vote, Villaraigosa 46%. Hahn takes office July 1st, succeeding Richard Riordan. Jeffrey Kay will have a full report later in the program. An uncle of Nepal's crown prince blamed him today for a palace massacre. The king, queen, and 7 other royals were gunned down in Kathmandu Friday night. Crown Prince Dipendra was shot as well and later died of his wounds. The uncle told the Associated Press he'd spoken to witnesses and survivors. He said the king forced Dipendra to leave a palace gathering for drinking and misbehaving, but the prince came back with an assault rifle and opened fire. An official investigation begins tomorrow. Macedonia's prime minister today threatened to declare war against ethnic Albanian rebels. He did so after the insurgents ambushed and killed 5 government soldiers overnight. The attacks came near Tetovo, the country's second largest city. A government spokesman said the prime minister now wants a full mobilization and emergency powers, but the European Union urged restraint, and in Washington, State Department spokesman Richard Boucher did the same.
Even in these most difficult moments, we think Macedonia's legitimately elected government and party leaders should press forward on the path that they have chosen, which we see as the correct path, and that is the path of interethnic dialogue to address the concerns of all citizens of Macedonia, together with a continuation of their measured response to extremist provocations.
The fighting in Macedonia has raised fears of a full-scale civil war that could further destabilize the Balkans. We'll have more on Macedonia later in the program tonight. A jury in Los Angeles today awarded $3 billion to a smoker with lung cancer. Cigarette maker Philip Morris was ordered to pay the damages to a 56-year-old man. He said he began smoking at the age of 13 and claimed the company failed to warn him of the health risks of smoking. The company's lawyers are expected to appeal. Pfizer will expand free distribution of an AIDS-related drug to 50 poor countries. The company made that announcement today. The drug treats a form of meningitis and infections of the esophagus in AIDS patients. It's already being distributed free in South Africa. President Bush dedicated the National D-Day Memorial today in Bedford, Virginia. This was the 57th anniversary of the Allied invasion of Europe in World War II. The memorial honors more than 6,000 Americans killed or wounded in the landings in Normandy, France. Bedford was chosen as the site because it lost 23 men out of a population of 3,200. That was more per capita than any other American town. And that's it for the news summary tonight. Now it's on to the changed Senate and Senator Daschle, a ruling against McVeigh, the Los Angeles mayor's election, and a foreign correspondence about Macedonia. The Democrats take control of the Senate. Kwame Holman begins.
With liberty and justice for all.
Senators arrived in the chamber this morning well before the scheduled 11 o'clock start. They came to witness the official and historic changeover of majority rule from the Republicans to the Democrats.
The Majority Leader.
Though he held the job briefly in January, this was the first time Tom Daschle of South Dakota, 16 years in the Senate, truly could be called Majority Leader. It's a title he earned at midnight when Senator Jim Jeffords of Vermont officially left the Republican Party and became an independent. With Democrats now in the majority, Daschle's first task was to install a new president pro tempore.
I send a resolution to the desk and ask for its immediate consideration.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The resolution is agreed to.
Robert Byrd, in his 8th Senate term, replaced 98-year-old Republican Strom Thurmond of South Carolina, who held the post during the last 6.5 years of Republican majority control. The position mostly is ceremonial, but it puts Byrd, now 83, third in line of succession to the presidency.
Do you, Senator Robert Byrd, solemnly swear that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that you take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which you are about to enter, so help you God?
So help me God, I do.
As members and staffers rose to applaud Senator Byrd, the new majority leader thanked both senior senators. Daschle then spoke in praise of Vermont's Jim Jeffords.
Last week, I was deeply touched by Senator Jeffords' courageous decision, his eloquent words. The senator from Vermont has always commanded bipartisan respect because of the work that he does. Regardless of where he sits in this chamber, that is work which will continue, and America will be better for it.
Daschle went on to describe his vision for the Senate.
Republicans and Democrats come to this floor with different philosophies, different agendas. We believe in the power of ideas together, Republicans and Democrats. We believe in fashioning those ideas into sound public policy, Republicans and Democrats.
For Mississippi Republican Trent Lott, today ended a 5-year stint as majority leader. Now the leader of the minority party, Lott promised Daschle cooperation.
I know that Senator Daschle will find some time that the weight of this job will be as heavy as the weight of Atlas when he carried the earth on his shoulders. And I hope that on occasion I can help make that weight a little lighter. Of course, at one point, Atlas tricked Hercules and dumped that burden off on Hercules. But later on, another trick was employed, and Atlas wound up with this weight back on him as he was fated to do. Now, what is the moral of that story? The moral is this job will be tough. We're all going to try to make it bearable and easier for you. And, of course, I'm hoping someday the weight will come back where it was fated to be.
And Lott closed with these remarks.
It's not about personalities. I still believe that government is about ideas and about issues. So it's not really that important what role we serve in. What is important is what do we do for the people that we serve? What legacy will we leave for the next generation? I believe we can get it done. We got a lot of work to do. Let's get started. And I again pledge to you my support and cooperation, Senator Daschle.
Shortly after the ceremonial transfer of power, it was back to business. Majority Leader Daschle called for resuming debate on the president's education bill. Daschle said he hopes the Senate will complete the bill by next week.
And now a Newsmaker interview with the new Senate Majority Leader, Democrat Tom Daschle of South Dakota. First, congratulations, Senator.
Thank you, Jim.
The education bill, you went back to work, as Kwame just said. Will we see immediate signs of the change in the debate and the way this education bill is going to be handled?
Well, of course, the education bill was a bipartisan effort before the change took place. And so I don't know that there'll be any immediate appreciation of the change that might be seen down the road. I think the education bill is the first and maybe one of the best ways with which to launch this new time in bipartisanship, and I hope we can do that collectively and comprehensively as we finish the bill next week.
As you say, it's a bipartisan bill. Is it correct to say the major differences now between Republicans and Democrats, at least most Republicans and most Democrats, has to do with the amount of money that's going to be spent rather than a philosophical difference?
Oh, I think that by and large it does involve resources. Clearly, we are for reform, but we've argued that you have to have the resources in order to enact meaningful reform, especially in education. And we're still having some difficulty in coming to agreement on that. There are other major policy questions. We'll be debating vouchers at some point yet before the end of the debate, and there'll be other very controversial matters. But I would say of all the issues that are of importance to us, the resources, the commitment we must make budgetarily is of paramount importance.
But just to make sure we understand this situation now, there's nothing that you can do as the majority leader to change the outcome of this vote on the education bill itself, correct? No procedural thing that changed today that would affect the outcome of this particular legislation.
Oh, there's no procedural motion that I could anticipate that I would want to use at this point, because we very strongly want to see a good, comprehensive education bill that has both Democratic and Republican imprint on it, and that's exactly what you're going to see. I'm confident that we can successfully complete our effort and that it'll get a good bipartisan vote.
Let's assume that happens. Then what's the next order of business, and when do we see the Daschle era of leadership begin, sir?
Well, I would hope you see it today. I would hope with the tone that I attempted to set with my opening remarks, the tone that we created as we deliberated on education, the way with which we're working through the organization resolution, all of those things are elements, I think, of this new majority and the tone that we want to create as we work through the more complex questions. But the next bill to come up in answer to your question is the Patient's Bill of Rights. Our view is that is one that should have been passed a long time ago. It has strong bipartisan support. My hope is that we can get that done too.
Now, that would not be next if you were not the majority leader, if Trent Lott was still the majority leader, correct? So that's correct. That's a big change.
That's correct.
But again, that does not necessarily mean the result and the final, when it finally comes to a vote, will be different. Is that correct too?
Well, I think that's correct, and at least I hope that's correct. My guess is that because of the way we have been negotiating and working now for a long period of time, the growing majority of people who support the bill will be in evidence, and we will have a good vote, as you say, regardless of who would have chosen to bring it up.
So the important thing here I'm trying to get at is that where the difference is going to come, at least in these first few weeks or so, is that Patient's Bill of Rights may not have come up for a month or so, or it may never have come up if the Republican leader didn't want it to, but it's going to come up next because you and the Democrats want it to.
Well, Jim, there's two things that I think will be in evidence. First of all, how we handle the floor agenda, the schedule. I don't think there's any question this is going to be perhaps a fairly significant departure from what was originally anticipated under the Republican majority. The second, of course, is at the committee level. What kind of hearings will be held? What kind of bills will be marked up? What kind of opportunities will there be for us to explore the issues? That too will change, and obviously the most important evidence of that will be the agenda set by each committee chairman.
I want to get some of those to some of those specifics in a moment, but I was struck by something you said, and we just ran it, that Republicans and Democrats have two different philosophies. How do you see the differences in the philosophies of the Republicans and the Democrats as constituted now in the United States Senate?
Well, I think that the Democratic philosophy is one of collective goodwill, of a collective investment in our country, a recognition that we're stronger together than we are separately, and that in working through the power of that collective achievement, that we can do a lot for each other, we can do a lot for this country, whether it's in education or in healthcare or in infrastructure or in energy now. The array of opportunities, the array of challenges that we have to face can be more consequentially and successfully addressed if we do it together. I don't think our Republican colleagues share that point of view, and that probably is the philosophical divide. Now, there is a lot of overlap, and I'm hopeful that over the course of the next several weeks we can find that middle ground as we address the many issues that we have in our agenda.
The Republicans would probably to answer the same question that, well, the Democrats want more government involvement in the solution than we Republicans do. Is that another way of saying it? Would you agree with that?
Well, I'm not for more government. I'm not for big government. I'm for smart government. I'm for a government that responds efficiently and with the least amount of bureaucracy, the least amount of red tape, the least amount of tax dollars committed unnecessarily. That, in my view, is the difference generationally, perhaps, and that's something we're going to impress upon our colleagues, and I think will be the imprint you'll see in most of our bills.
Now, you mentioned the overlap. For instance, the Senate has already passed tax cuts, and you and the other members of the Democratic leadership in the Senate were strongly opposed to that, and yet many of your Democrats voted for that. And of course, there were some Republicans who voted against it, and we've had the Jeffords example as well. So it is a mistake to think that all Republicans vote one way and all Democrats vote with you on everything too, correct?
That's correct.
Is that going to change?
No, that won't change. I mean, we are united, I think, as a caucus, and I feel very good about the cohesion. But, you know, I'm not expecting absolute, total unanimity on every issue. That isn't why we're here. I think people have to feel free to express themselves, to vote the way their conscience tells them. We're going to accept that, respect it, and move on. All I can do is make the best case for our point of view and hope that I'll get as good a vote as we can get and move on to the next issue.
But when you go to one of your Democratic colleagues now as the majority leader rather than as the minority leader, do you carry a little more ammunition in your parcel, so to speak?
I think so. I think there is clearly a difference, in part because I'm able to set the agenda. We're going to be more on the offensive than we would have been if we had been in the minority. Minority oftentimes is forced to play a lot of defense because they're responding to the agenda that's set out by the majority. So I think I'll have advantages that I didn't have before, most certainly.
Senator Lott and other Republicans wanted assurances from you that judicial and other appointees of the president would get a good hearing and get a vote. Did you give them these assurances?
Well, I have assured my colleagues on both sides of the aisle that we are going to be as fair as any majority party could be as the consideration of both nominations as well as the issues the administration cares about is considered. I don't think we have any choice. We've got to do that. That was exactly our record the last time we were in the majority in the early 90s, and that is going to be our record now.
Senator Leahy, the new Judiciary Committee chairman, said on this program last night that nobody with extreme views, whether they be of the left or the right, should be on the federal bench. Do you agree with him?
Well, I'm hopeful that we can encourage people to nominate those in the administration who have the power to do so, to nominate those in the political mainstream. I don't think our country, I don't think that the Senate is necessarily prepared to support extremist views. But I do believe that there is a desire, and I've had a number of conversations among my Republican colleagues about this, a desire to be as supportive of mainstream positions with regard to nominations as we can be.
President Bush, as you know, during the presidential campaign often named Justices Scalia and Thomas as examples of folks that he would like to appoint to the federal bench. Are they extreme? Would they pass the extremist test of the current United States Senate Democratic majority?
Jim, I'm not going to get into personalities.
Right.
I don't think that it's appropriate right now to hypothetically consider options, especially as you relate them to current judicial appointments. I think that what we have to do is to recognize that we've got to work together. We've got to try to find a way to respond to the needs of the country with regard to the judiciary. But we do have expectations, and we're going to insist that those expectations be a part of the consideration of the Senate as we consider the qualifications and ultimately the eligibility of the nominees that are provided to us.
So when Senator Lott says he's worried that you all are going to apply some kind of litmus test, that if somebody is too conservative or too much to the right, you're going to block the ratification, is that right?
I'm not supportive of litmus tests per se. I don't think that that's the way we ought to proceed. There is a procedure that the Senate Judiciary Committee uses. There's a procedure, of course, that is immersed in tradition here in the Senate. We're going to follow that tradition, those procedures. We're going to respect that tradition, but we're also going to be respectful of nominees. What I don't want to do is to see payback. As strongly as our Democrats feel about the way we were treated, about the way some of our nominees were treated, I don't think we ought to extend that practice. I think we've got to show fairness in ways that were not shown when we were in the majority or when we had the administration.
Have you said that to your colleagues?
I have.
Yeah. Now, another power that comes to the majority is the power, as you said earlier, to hold hearings and full-scale investigations and that sort of thing. There's already been a suggestion that there will now be hearings on the high energy prices. First, do you support that? Do you think the Senate should get into a full-blown investigation of high energy prices?
I do. In fact, I've called for it. I think a bipartisan investigation is very meritorious. I think we ought to find ways with which to better understand what's happened, why has it become so exacerbated in recent months, why the tremendous amount of profit we see now reported by some of the energy companies. I think we need to look into that. I think we need to expand that review, of course, into the larger question of what should be our energy policy, especially as it relates to the crisis we see right now in California.
Now, you said bipartisan, but just for the record, do you believe there would be such an investigation if the Republicans had remained in the majority?
Probably not. But then again, you asked the question earlier, what would a majority under Democratic authority be and how would be in evidence? Mm-hmm. That would be a good example, I think. What we're going to do in energy is just yet another demonstration of the new direction that we hope we can move the Senate.
Is there any other area that immediately comes to mind where you believe there should be something like this, Senate hearings, the whole 9 yards, that would not have happened under a Republican majority that will happen now under you all?
Well, I think election reform is also something you're going to see a significant amount of effort and time invested. There's no question we've got some very serious problems with regard to the way the elections have been held. The evidence most recently in the most recent report would indicate that we've got a problem that has to be solved, that has to be addressed in a way that raises the level of confidence among minority communities especially. So you're going to see Democrats pursue that agenda as well, and it probably will happen sooner rather than later.
What do you make of Senator Lott's comment the other day that, yes, the Democrats now have a plurality, but he said a couple of other things. That he said the one thing they do not have is the moral authority to run the Senate. What do you think of that?
Well, I disagree fundamentally. Anyone who has 51 place settings in his caucus has the moral authority, and we have 51 place settings. I don't think it's a question of moral authority. It's a question of making sure that we do the best we can with the authority we have to guide this country, provide it leadership in a constructive and bipartisan way, and that's what you're going to see from us.
In general terms, Senator Daschle, how do you see your role as majority leader contrasted with that of the President of the United States in dealing with his agenda, dealing with what he wants and he feels that he was elected to do?
Jim, I think we were both elected, obviously, by very, very narrow margins, by the slimmest of margins. I'm not sure the President fully appreciated that in the way he has conducted his strategy so far legislatively. It worked because he had protection under reconciliation and our budget rules, but that won't work in the future. I also have a very narrow majority, and I would hope that what we could do is to recognize that both parties must feel invested. Both parties must feel included in the process in order for this to work. Democrats have not felt invested or included. I don't think that we ought to reverse those roles. I think it's important for us to make sure Republicans do feel invested and included, and that's what I'm going to do. I hope that's what the administration does.
I understand you're having dinner with the president tomorrow night?
That's correct.
You going to tell him what you just said?
I sure am.
Have you told him that before?
If he's watching tonight, I won't have to.
Okay. Have you told him this before?
Well, I haven't had many opportunities to tell him anything in recent weeks, but I hope this is a new day, and I hope that we'll have many opportunities in the future to talk and constructively consider just how we might act together in a more bipartisan manner.
Well, again, Senator Daschle, congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
And tomorrow night we will talk with the Senate's new Minority Leader, Trent Lott. Still to come on the NewsHour tonight, no delay for Timothy McVeigh, a new mayor for L.A., and a foreign correspondence. Betty Ann Bowser starts our coverage of the McVeigh story.
Yeah, here they come.
The ruling set reporters scrambling from the federal district courthouse in Denver. It came after Judge Richard Mach heard oral arguments from the government and McVeigh's attorneys for an hour and a half. Lawyers for the self-confessed and convicted Oklahoma City bomber argued for more time. They wanted to examine thousands of pages of FBI documents that were not handed over to the defendant at the time of his trial. They also accused the government of fraud. McVeigh did not attend the hearing. He is on death row in a federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana, where he is now scheduled to die by lethal injection in 5 days. Last month, after the FBI admitted it made a mistake in not giving the documents to McVeigh's lawyers, Attorney General John Ashcroft delayed the May 16th execution until both sides could argue their cases. In court today, defense attorney Robert Nye argued for a stay, saying there might be information in the documents that could have helped McVeigh when he was on trial. His lawyers also said there might have been evidence implicating others in the bombing. The government said there is nothing in the documents that would cast doubt on McVeigh's guilt. And Judge Mach agreed. Considering the evidence presented to the jury, said the 71-year-old federal jurist, there is no plausible argument that Timothy McVeigh is not guilty. And while Mach said the FBI may have been guilty of negligence, he found no pattern of fraud. McVeigh's attorneys reacted immediately.
Of course, we are extremely disappointed in the court's ruling today. We will file on Mr. McVeigh's behalf an appeal to the United States Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit, and it is to that issue that we must turn our immediate attention. We apologize that we will not be able to address further of your questions at this point, but as you are well aware, we have a lot of work to do.
In Washington, Attorney General Ashcroft, who had opposed any further delay of the execution, was pleased with the decision.
I believe that we have satisfied the responsibility completely and thoroughly, that the system operate fairly and innocently in dealing with a defendant who is unquestionably guilty. And the ruling of the court in Denver today is a ruling for justice. It's a justice which cannot be denied, and it is an appropriate ruling for which I am grateful.
Dr. Paul Heath, a bombing survivor, echoed the feelings of many Oklahoma City residents.
I think people who expected to stay were not listening very carefully. I have never heard any creditable evidence to indicate that in these documents where they came in late, that they contained any idea of a conspiracy to withhold them, or that the information in those documents would have cleared Mr. McVeigh or would have implicated others. I just don't believe that. The defense went way beyond fishing today. They asked this federal court to let them seine the bottom of the lake to see if they could find something. No wonder the judge did not allow it.
McVeigh's attorneys indicated their appeal to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals will come tomorrow.
And to Gwen Eiffel.
Now, some legal analysis of today's developments. Scott Mendeloff was one of the lead trial lawyers on the prosecution team in the McVeigh bombing case. He's now in private practice in Chicago. Former criminal defense lawyer Elizabeth Semmel is now director of the American Bar Association's Death Penalty Representation Project. She is not associated with McVeigh's defense, but has had considerable experience representing defendants in capital cases. Scott Mendeloff, what's your impression of today's ruling?
Well, I was a little surprised at the ruling, given Judge Meech's prior record of really doing everything he could to protect defendants' rights. But you could see from the tenor of the comments that he made that he felt that there was just nothing to the submission that Defendant McVeigh's lawyers made, and in fact believed that Mr. McVeigh had been given every possibility of a fair trial going in, and had gotten that trial, and there's nothing to be added here.
Elizabeth Semmel, how did you read the judge's statement today?
Well, I was concerned by the judge's order, and I think that one of the issues, a number of issues, will be raised by the defense on the appeal. First of all, the judge seemed to understand that what the lawyers were doing was asking for more time, but then the judge essentially leapt to the conclusion that no matter what the defense was to uncover or find, Mr. McVeigh was guilty of the crime, that is, guilty of the bombing. That's not what the defense was arguing, and I think that in the appeal to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, one of the things the defense will be pointing out is that the judge essentially got it wrong and didn't understand the argument they were making or the opportunity that they were seeking.
The argument they were making was that fraud had been perpetrated on the court by the FBI for failing to turn over these documents. Did the judge just reject that argument out of hand?
He rejected that argument, but my point is he rejected it prematurely. What the defense is saying is that the government came forward literally not at the 11th hour but at the 12th hour with 4,500 documents, numerous CDs, and said essentially go fish. And at this late hour come forward with evidence of a fraud on the court in order to essentially reopen the proceedings. And the defense is saying, we think we can do that. We need the opportunity to further investigate. That's what it was asking for, and the court, without giving that opportunity, was saying essentially you can never get there.
How about that, Scott Mendeloff? Was the judge's ruling premature?
No, and I really think that the statement "go fish" is an unfair characterization. What happened here, if you look at the judge's ruling, is that his view was that the defense was really trying to row a very difficult route up a very, very stormy river here. What they had was a theory, a creative theory, to try to get around the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act of 1996, which set a standard that they admitted in their brief they couldn't meet. To be able to get around that provision and get the stay they wanted, they really had to show with the evidence they had at their disposal that there was a very reasonable likelihood that they would be able to meet the standard of fraud on the court. And what the judge did is say, look, I've looked at the evidence that was presented by the defendants by Defendant McVeigh as being the important proof, the evidence that was submitted in camera and not made public so far. And his ruling was this was no different than any of the other evidence that was already produced. And the other thing that he said, which was extremely important here, is that the defense took the position that Mr. McVeigh was in fact not saying he didn't commit this crime. So the defense is arguing, well, we're looking through these records to see if there's proof of other people involved. Well, the judge points out, and rightly so, that Mr. McVeigh is the best resource for that information. Mr. McVeigh would truly know who was involved and who wasn't. The defendants don't have to search records to find that out. And in fact, the judge made the point that the defendants had that information, that is through Mr. McVeigh, throughout the entire proceedings, had that during the course of the first penalty hearing, and chose not to use that information.
Mr. Mendeloff says that the judge basically, he mentions that the documents that were at issue here, most of them were never made public. Will we ever know, is there any mechanism for us to know whether there was anything for us to know other than the judge's conclusion, that there was anything that had anything to do?
We may never, unless the judge unseals the documents that are presently sealed, or another court, the 10th Circuit, on review or the Supreme Court does. I think it's very, very important to emphasize, however, that lawyers make decisions about what they do in a case based on the information available to them at the time. And what the lawyers for Mr. McVeigh are arguing is these 4,500 documents were not available to us at trial, were not available to us when this court reviewed the case. And so the judgments we made were made based on the absence of that information. And that's critical. And again, the issue here is not whether Mr. McVeigh is guilty or not guilty of the crime. As the defense counsel pointed out, the question may indeed be, was the sentence a fair sentence? And may the penalty phase of the trial have turned out differently had the lawyers had the opportunity to have the information which the government waited, again, until the 11th hour to disclose.
Mr. Mendeloff, what would have been wrong if the judge had decided to allow these lawyers a little bit of extra time to decide what was really there?
Nothing would have been wrong with that, and in fact, that would have been a perfectly appropriate reaction to this, in my personal opinion. But I don't think that what the judge did here was out of line either. I mean, you have to remember, the judge, unlike most of the viewers and my colleague, knows what the evidence is in this case. He has gone through all of the proof and gone through the two different trials, and he knows whether this evidence was cumulative. In other words, whether it was just the same as other evidence that Mr. McVeigh had at his disposal during the first trial. In effect, what the judge is saying is, yes, this is cumulative. It's just the same proof as any other proof that Mr. McVeigh had. And also, the other thing the judge is saying is that based on his review of the proof and comparing it to what was produced earlier, he sees no indication of any kind of intentional withholding of proof. And remember, to establish a fraud on the court, there are two things that must be shown. One, an intentional withholding of that proof by the FBI, and two, that the proof goes to the very core of the case.
Ms. Semmel, the judge wrote today, among other things, that we are not here to try the FBI. Does this mean that what the FBI did in withholding this information, or whatever happened to this information, that it was acceptable?
Well, that's an interesting distinction that the judge makes in his opinion. In essence, it seems to insulate the conduct of the FBI from the scrutiny of the court, and I'm sure that's one of the issues that the defense will raise. While it is true that the court did not find an intent to withhold or a scheme to withhold on the part of the FBI, one of the points that the defense was so cogently arguing was we need the time in order to be able to pursue those leads, acknowledging that they would have to make that case. So I was a little disturbed by the distinction that the court was making, essentially saying that the FBI apparently was negligent, perhaps mismanaged, but that wasn't what the court was being called upon to assess.
You've outlined a couple of the things which the defense might use in their appeal. How high is the burden for them to appeal this, for anything to change?
Well, there's no question that it is an uphill battle at this point, because the defense is going to have to contend with both the factual findings that the judge made, that is the fact that there was no intentional scheme to defraud, and the legal conclusions that he drew. And I expect the defense to be arguing essentially that both were wrong.
Do you agree with that, Mr. Mendeloff?
I do.
So what happens if this gets to the Supreme Court? Is the Supreme Court likely to side with this judge, because this judge has been there through both this trial and the Nichols trial?
The real battleground, I think, is going to be the 10th Circuit. If the 10th Circuit denies this stay and basically holds that the execution can go forward, I seriously doubt whether the Supreme Court will grant the stay. The procedure is simply that the justice that's assigned to the circuit, Justice Breyer, receives the motion for the stay, but they need 5 justices to vote to stay this proceeding. And given this record and the lack of any novel legal issue, I seriously doubt whether the Supreme Court would vote in favor of the stay.
The Supreme Court last week did express some interest in Terry Nichols' case. Is there any connection between these two?
Well, there's a connection in the sense that we're talking about other participants in the offense. Judge Mage attempts to draw a distinction between the theory used in Mr. Nichols' case and the theory used in Mr. McVeigh's case. What the defense is essentially saying now is that some of that evidence that may very well have been relevant, again, to the sentencing question in Mr. McVeigh's case, was not available to Mr. McVeigh at the time of trial or review of his case.
Elizabeth Semmel, Scott Mendeloff, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Jeffrey Kay of KCET Los Angeles reports on the election of a new mayor.
At his celebration last night, LA City Attorney James Hahn thanked neighborhoods across Los Angeles as essential to his mayoral victory.
Thank you to every great part of this great city, from San Pedro to Sylmar, from Westchester to Boyle Heights.
His defeated opponent, former California Assembly Speaker Antonio Villaraigosa, said despite defeat, both he and the city had benefited from his unsuccessful campaign.
When you run a campaign of hope, when you run a campaign to bring people together, you're enriched by the experience. I have no tears here.
The conciliatory tone of both candidates was in sharp contrast to the heated rhetoric and charges made in the last weeks of the campaign.
Fact: the father of a convicted crack cocaine dealer contributed money to Antonio Villaraigosa.
Hahn drew criticism for ads denouncing Villaraigosa's 1996 request to pardon a convicted drug dealer whose father was a campaign contributor. The ad resonated with voters.
There were some things about the other candidate, Villaraigosa, that I really didn't like hearing and I wasn't too fond of. And
like what?
Some of the scandal with the whole taking the money with from a drug dealer, things like that for his campaigns.
Political scientist Raphael Sonnenschein says Hahn's negative campaigning proved decisive.
It put Villaraigosa on the defensive the entire campaign, where in effect he was arguing against the Hahn campaign throughout the whole campaign, and he was never able to make Hahn the subject of debate and attack.
On substance, there was little that separated the two candidates, both Democrats. The key to victory was coalition building in a city where no racial or ethnic groups hold a majority. The importance of coalitions was reflected in Hahn's victory speech last night.
Our campaign put together a coalition as diverse as this great city. We had Asian Pacific Islanders, African Americans, Latinos, Anglos, Indo-Americans, Pakistani Americans, Armenians. We had Democrats, Republicans, and Independents too.
Most of Hahn's support came from an unusual combination of moderate and conservative whites and older African Americans who remember Hahn's late father, a popular elected official and civil rights advocate.
We have 2 to 3 minutes to answer some questions. Great.
The Los Angeles Times exit polls suggest that both candidates cobbled together formidable coalitions. Sonnenschein is a consultant to the LA Times poll. Who was able to bridge racial divides?
Ironically, it was the losing candidate. Villaraigosa really had the stronger coalition. It was Latino voters, Jewish voters to a certain degree, but mostly liberal white voters who have a lot in common politically with Latinos in this election. The Hahn coalition, by contrast, was African Americans and white moderates and conservatives who have very little in common politically. So it's not a broad bridging coalition. It was really 2 separate cases made to 2 different groups for very different reasons.
Villaraigosa's main support came from the city's mushrooming Latino population. Latinos turned out yesterday in record numbers to support his candidacy. Villaraigosa received some 75% of the Latino vote.
The fact that Villaraigosa lost should not obscure the fact that the Latino rise from 8% of the vote 8 years ago to 22% of the vote in the Tuesday election is a revolution that has created vast new opportunities for cross-cutting coalitions, some liberal, some conservative, some white-led, some Latino-led, some black-led, that it's going to take many years to sort out.
This morning, Hahn stressed a commitment to reaching out to communities that didn't support him at the polls.
I've had a lot of friends in the Latino community over the years. I didn't get the lion's share of that vote, but I've always done very well in that community. And I think people know that, the campaign is over. We need to all build bridges towards each other. I'm confident that people will see that Jim Hahn is somebody who will bring the city together.
The Hahn political name became something of a dynasty yesterday. Not only was James Hahn elected mayor, his sister won a seat on the LA City Council. The victorious candidates take office July 1st.
Finally tonight, a foreign correspondence, our occasional conversations with reporters stationed overseas for American news organizations. Ray Suarez has this one.
And tonight our correspondent is Jeffrey Smith, Southern Europe bureau chief for The Washington Post. Recently, he's been covering the latest flare-up in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. Macedonia is a place that was celebrated for being on the edge of all these terrible mini civil wars going on in the region. Now it seems to be falling prey to them. How is this happening?
You do get a sense that it's a series of dominoes falling, and that this was just Macedonia's time. In a way, there's a little bit of truth to that, because the fighting that's taking place in Macedonia now was sparked by a rebellion, which was in turn stoked by the same people who stoked the rebellion in Kosovo. The people who organized the rebels who began to attack police in Macedonia are the same people who helped form the UÇK, the Kosovo Liberation Army in Kosovo. So there is a link between these two, even if the people who are doing the actual fighting are Macedonians primarily.
Can we call what's going on there a civil war yet? I mean, they've escalated all the way from pistols to helicopter gunships now.
Yeah. It's still, the fighting is in isolated pockets, and the citizenry have not taken up arms, which is what happened in Kosovo to a large extent. You could call what happened there a civil conflict in a way. But in Macedonia, the fighting is still limited to certain regions of the country, and if you talk to Macedonian, both Albanians and Slavs, you get the feeling that most people would wish the violence would die down and that some kind of political compromise could be reached, and that it could all be settled peacefully. There isn't a kind of a hunger for war, like the hunger for war that existed, for example, in Croatia at the outset of the conflict with Bosnia. There isn't a sense that war is imminent. There are still a lot of people who would like things to be resolved without violence.
You mentioned that civilians haven't taken up arms, but are civilians starting to carry more of the burden of this fighting?
Absolutely. It's Albanians don't visit Macedonian shops that they visited before, and Macedonian Slavs don't visit Albanian shops in the same way. They talk to each other less. There's more of a complication about being seen socializing together. I wrote a story a couple of weeks ago about a Macedonian Slav mayor and an ethnic Albanian advisor, and I asked them to have their picture taken together for the newspaper to accompany the story, and there was a bit of a pause before they agreed to do it, just because it's a sensitive time for Slavs and Albanians to be sitting down together. The tensions in each community are rising steadily. And you see these little signs around Macedonia of a society basically breaking into opposing camps. You see sandbags outside of the mayor's office, the police station, in a lot of the towns that you go to. You see army soldiers at key intersections, armored vehicles on the street. You see people walking on the street with their heads down, their eyes averted, just anxious to get out of trouble and worried about whatever might arise and anxious to hide, in effect.
So you have a front seat to a society that's kind of unraveling.
Exactly, yeah.
And yet, as someone who covered the Kosovo War, you know where this could lead.
It's a complete tragedy that this is headed in this direction, because in that war, and in this war, if it breaks into a full-fledged war, it will be the civilians who get caught in between the extremists, the average Macedonian citizens, who will be caught in a vice, in effect, between people who want to take up arms and settle it with violence. These will be the people whose villages will be destroyed, as they're now being destroyed in certain parts of Macedonia. There could be if the war widens, I expect the same thing to happen that happened in Kosovo, which is massive destruction of housing, huge repair bill at the end of the conflict. The West would be called on to invest millions or hundreds of millions of dollars to repair housing, to bring people back to their homes, to recreate a society that's now being destroyed. It's a huge tragedy that this is happening.
Well, the West, in the form of NATO and the European Union, are very worried about Macedonia, traveling back and forth. To any effect?
As seen from the region, it's clear that the diplomatic water carrying is being done by the European Union, and particularly by Javier Solana, the Spanish diplomat who used to be the NATO Secretary General. He's coming on average about once a week, maybe once every week and a half, to try and calm things down. And the pattern of the conflict has been that as soon as he turns around and gets on a plane and goes back to Brussels, to the European Union headquarters, the conflict flares up again. And then he comes and things quiet down for a few days, and he's sort of able to tamp things down. I'm not sure that they've figured out, maybe because of inexperience, they're not sure that they've figured out the right tone, the right balance to strike. Because on the one hand, they're very tough on the rebels, and they say these are terrorists and there should be no negotiations with them. And on the other hand, they tell the Macedonians privately that you've got to sit down and make some reforms, such as the reforms that the rebels and the other ethnic Albanian parties are calling for, because this cannot be solved through violence. So in public, the rhetoric has been very strongly supportive of the government and the government's policy of pounding the rebels. In private, it's been more moderated, and it's been encouraging of some kind of diplomatic solution. I'm not, since mostly what's happened so far is not negotiation but violence, I'm not sure that they've got the balance right.
All in all, you don't sound very optimistic.
You have to understand that in Macedonia, even though there are Albanians and Slavs who are friends and have been friendly for a long time, there's been, in the broad context, some social distance for a long time also. And there are lots of resentments on the part of the predominant minority, the ethnic Albanians. They really resent what they feel is mistreatment by the Macedonian Slavs. And the Macedonian Slavs look at the ethnic Albanians and they say, these people are, in some cases, wealthier than Macedonian Slavs. They were forced out of the economy, the communist economy, 10 years ago, and so they're more entrepreneurial, by and large, the ethnic Albanian population, which means that they've weathered the transition away from communism faster and better. And so they look at the ethnic Albanians and say, look how wealthy these people are, look what good lives they have, how can they possibly want more? And the ethnic Albanians look at the Macedonian Slavs and they get comments like this, that Macedonian Slav will come up to an ethnic Albanian and say, you don't seem like an Albanian. And they have no clue that that's anything but a compliment. I mean, this is sort of, there are economic resentments, there are ethnic resentments, there are some religious resentments. The ethnic Albanians in Macedonia tend to be more religious, meaning Muslim, Islamic faith, than the ethnic Albanians in Kosovo. So there's a little bit more of a divide on the religious side. And the Macedonian Slavs suspect that the Albanians really would like to carve away a piece of their territory. And they resent that, and it makes them respond, with anger and defiance when they might otherwise be sitting down to talk about compromise.
Jeffrey Smith, thanks for coming by.
Again, the major stories of this Wednesday. A federal judge in Denver refused to delay Timothy McVeigh's June 11th execution for the Oklahoma City bombing. His lawyers immediately appealed. And Democrats took control of the Senate. On the NewsHour tonight, the new Majority Leader, Tom Daschle, said the Senate's priorities will now include investigating energy prices and passing election reforms, and he said he wants Republicans to feel included in that process. We'll talk to the man he replaced, Republican leader Trent Lott, tomorrow night. And a follow-up to a report we aired last night on new power plants in California. The San Jose City Council did reverse itself, voting last night a preliminary approval to a new plant in its city. Opponents are expected to go to court in a new attempt to block the plant. We'll see you online and again here tomorrow evening. I'm Jim Lehrer. Thank you and good night.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by...
Imagine a world where no child begs for food. While some will look on that as a dream, others will look long and hard and get to work. ADM, the nature of what's to come.
Helping people with estate planning so that those they care about get more than a simple will can provide. See how we earn it. Solomon Smith Barney.
And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. This program was also made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. Video cassettes of the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer are available from PBS Video. Call 1-800-328-PBS-1.
This is PBS.